Welcome back to the Daily Drama on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. This is February, Black History Month 2025, at a time when there seems to be a wave of political initiatives seeking to downplay and even dismantle the celebration of Black History Month. The movement to honor the contributions of African Americans remains strong. And tonight, we will take a look at how my guests say Black History Month should be recognized, taught, and reflected this year, while also taking a look at the challenges that lie ahead. My guests are Dr. Kay Wise Whitehead, president of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and Steve Williams, president of the National Juneteenth Observation Foundation. Thank you both so much for joining this conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harold.
So, a couple of really quick facts here. ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, has designated African Americans and labor as the theme for 2025 Black History Month, highlighting the significant role Black labor has played in building the nation. Of course, we know that President Donald Trump issued a proclamation Friday declaring February to be Black History Month, after weeks of attacking diversity, equity, and an anti-DEI wave that is sweeping corporate America. And this proclamation, it doesn't mention slavery, it doesn't mention the civil rights movement or landmark pieces of civil rights legislation. And of course, this follows reports that the Department of Defense is pausing events and activities related to Black History Month or other identity-based observations, including Pride Month, MLK Junior Day. I want to talk, first of all, Dr. K, about this year's theme. How did you come to the African Americans and labor theme?
So first, let me say thank you so much, Harold Fisher, for inviting us to be on the show. Thank you, Steve. I'm excited about being on here with you as well with your work with Juneteenth. For ASALH, which is founded by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, we hold up Black history. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who of course wrote The Miseducation of the Negro, who launched Negro History Week in 1926, that later became Black History Week and then Black History Month by 1976. We stand firm on what our founder put out, which is about setting aside time, designated time, to be able to uplift who we are and uplift our contributions to American history. We definitely understand and believe and stand on the fact that Black history is interwoven into the American history story. We plan our themes years in advance, anywhere from 2 to 3 years in advance of the target year, so we can make sure that we have all the materials, the resources. The Black History Bulletin is in line with that. Our Journal of African American History is in line with that. So we do the work and the this year, in particular, after coming off of a year where we celebrated African American in the arts, we thought we needed to look at the labor movement, look at the work and the contributions of people like A. Philip Randolph, who founded the Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters, and the work he did, the work of Mary McLeod Bethune, one of our former presidents, who was also involved in labor work, and thinking about what does it mean to contribute to a country, both visible labor, and we're thinking about all the ways in which we say drive trucks, we stock shelves, we teach in universities, we teach in schools, and invisible labor, the emotional labor that we spend out, whether it's taking care of aging parents or raising our children, all the ways that we have contributed and sometimes overlooked in terms of our contributions to the American history story.
It's so interesting that you talk about that, because even as I was listening to you and kind of remembering some Black history lessons, even for Black folks who try to keep their ears to the ground as it relates to important, dare I say, nuggets of Black history, we can often forget these things if we do not constantly, not just in February, but constantly are reminded and educated about these stories, Dr. K.
I'm glad you said that because we try to dispel myths. Because I think sometimes within our community, within our culture, myths kind of make their way throughout the internet. It becomes a TikTok story, it becomes a Facebook post. So the ongoing myth is like, oh, they gave us February, the shortest month of the year. The first myth we dispel is that one. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, as the son of formerly enslaved parents, as the second African American to get a PhD in history from Harvard University after W.B. Du Bois, he chose February because Black folks were already celebrating the birthday and the achievements of both Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, who chose his own birthday on February 14th. We were already doing that in our community. Black history was already being taught. So he said, let's put Negro History Week when we're already celebrating so we can continue to uplift the stories. We make the argument with the Sala is that even though Dr. Carter G. Woodson set it aside, we know our history has been taught from the pulpit. Our history was taught from parents to children while they were going to bed at night. Our history is taught by the very wind. He just kind of said, let's put aside a week and let's actually focus in all the schools and in all the churches to talk about it and to uplift it. So that's myth number one. Myth number two, which I think is an even bigger myth this year, is that Black History Month happens at the honor and the pleasure of the sitting president. It does not. We don't wait for anybody to proclaim Black History Month. We proclaim it. So prior to the president's statement on Friday at 7 p.m., as the president of the Sala, I had already put out my statement on Thursday. I'm like, you know what? Black History Month 2025, we proclaim it. And I based it upon what we were told that Elridge Cleaver once said, that when Rosa Parks chose not to get up, a gear somewhere in the machinery shifted and things were never the same again, a gear shifting moment. And I took people through in my statement, everything from when Mamie Till said, open the casket, let the world see what they did to my son, to Black Lives Matter and Black folks saying, you know what, we are here. We want the police to stop over-policing our community. These are gear shifting moments. And when Dr. Carter G. Woodson launched Negro History Week, a gear shifted. And now here in 2025, we proclaim it. We don't wait to be proclaimed. We get proclaimed ourselves. We don't wait for anyone to see us. We see ourselves.
Steve, what are your thoughts about, first of all, President Trump's proclamation and the fact that he mentioned Frederick Douglass, and he mentioned, but he also mentioned Harriet Tubman, but then he mentioned Tiger Woods, Clarence Thomas, and Thomas Sowell, who is a Black conservative who, honestly, I didn't even know who Thomas Sowell was. But again, as I said in the beginning, there were no mentions of just some of the big umbrella events of Black history. And I mean, no, there was no Malcolm X. There was no Marcus Garvey. There was no Martin Luther King. Your thoughts about that?
In 1893, Frederick Douglass created the Colored People's Observance Day. Frederick Douglass wanted to bring observance to that. Then the Negro History Annual Day of Observance was launched by Josephine Bruce and the Colored Women's Association. Carter G. Woodson followed up with that Negro History Week. In 1960, Dr. Robert Starling Pritchard founded Black History Month. He created the concept based off month-long celebrations of Juneteenth when he was a kid in Syracuse, New York. Juneteenth was a big deal in New York because the soldiers who came and brought the message in Galveston were from Juneteenth. He was also a traveler person that went to Haiti. Dr. Pritchard was the first Black recorded concert pianist. He was an artist and a creator, and he created Black History Month not to solely for Black people, but to bring about history and culture. The first time that happened was 60 years ago, 1965. When Dr. Pritchard was there. He was a founding member of the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation, a good friend of mine. I'm a musician also. We were all musicians and we talked about that. And the major thing about it was to influence everybody about the culture and arts that Black people are brought, which is the foundation of any civilization. It was preceded by what they called Nights of Negritude, where he performed classical music, and great jazz musicians from New York and New Jersey came around to bring people together. The whole thing is about bringing together. Our mission statement is to bring all Americans together to celebrate our common bond of freedom through the recognition, education, and the historic preservation of Juneteenth, right? So I can speak to myself personally. I'm a federal contractor. I was there the first time around. Before I was a federal contractor, I was an independent contractor. I was an independent contractor of the largest IT company in the DMV. I was the senior engineer. Through that position, I met Dr. Myers, and I spent 25 years on Capitol Hill. Everybody knows me. I know Joe Biden was a senator. I knew Barack Obama when he was stomping in Chicago with Dr. Myers using Juneteenth as his banner. Mm-hmm. Okay, I know Dr. Pichard, that's where I met him, was in Barack Obama's chambers. About that same time, I was an IT company. I worked at a place called my pet project, Lowell's Island Country Club, in where I live at Loudoun County, Virginia. It was owned by a bank. That bank went under. About 2009, a person by the name of Donald Trump bought that country club.
But Steve,
hold on. Let me get to my point real quick.
Okay, because the question was, what do you think of the proclamation? That's what I think of the proclamation. The proclamation is in order with. It does mention slavery, but it doesn't mention slavery, which makes it bigger than what we are. That's what Dr. Pichard was trying to tell. We did not start with slavery. Black history does not start with slavery. It's not the epitome where we're at. We are at a turning point right now. And here's the turning point. Let me put some numbers for you real quick. When we arrived here in 1619, we arrived on a pirate ship, i.e. Calvin Pearson, Project 1619, not Nicole Hannah Smith, who turned it around backwards. You mean Jones?
Nicole Hannah Jones.
Nicole, yes, go ahead.
It's backwards.
What do you mean?
It's a backwards ships. The true story of Project 1619 is part of Secret Adventurum. You guys can go Google that and figure out that's how it came. All right. And so we missed that story, right? We missed a lot of stuff. But 160 years of chattel slavery from 1705 to 1865 is what we have exactly. In the slave codes, it said, because of the action part of Secret Adventurum, you are considered chattel and slaves for life. 1705 slave codes, very much. Before then, it was a thing of indentured servitude. Black people.
Steve. I only have 45 minutes. Hold on.
I'll get to.
No, stop. Help me, Steve. Help me now. I need to stay on point. And Black History 2025. Really, and not just for Black folks, but for all folks who need to know, who may not know. And we are in a place right now where there are some people who do not know, who moving beyond Black History 2025 in February of 2025 may lose the benefit and the blessing of the information. So, well, I appreciate the conversation about chattel slavery and Nicole Hannah Jones, but on this day, the world has changed, and there are forces that are working to erase us, and that is the thing that I want to talk about, because again, as I mentioned to Dr. K, even for me as an educated Black man, that even when she began to mention those issues about labor, I'm like, oh yeah, and I'm interested. But for the people who are not interested, Black and others, there is a call to action, and I want to hear that from both of you. So please stay with us. The Daily Drum will continue on Sirius XM, channel 141 and 96.3 HD2. And don't forget, you can hear this in every edition via podcast on WHUR.com. This conversation continues in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about Black History Month. My guests are Dr. Kay Wise Whitehead, President of the Association for the Study of African American Life, and also Steve Williams, President of the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation. Before the break, I did want to go back to one of the points that I was making, Dr. K. Knowing now, for example, of what we're seeing at the Department of Defense, for example, and some of the things that have just happened over the past couple of weeks now about, for example, eliminating, and it's been brought back, but of course, eliminating stories about the Tuskegee Airmen, for example, and their wonderful achievements and the like. And just what are your thoughts about just kind of where we are?
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to still be on with you to talk this through. I think it's important that people are really grounded in what is happening now. I've been doing a lot of reading, everything from going back to Sun Tzu's The Art of War. I feel like I'm back in college, right? I've been reading Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny, just kind of helping me to understand and frame this moment, because we are under attack. And it's not just a one-layered attack, it's a multi-layered attack. So it's attacking our history, which means it's attacking our existence, which means it's attacking what it means to be an American. And so then we actually see an attack around, birthright citizenship. And then there's an attack where we're talking about the economy. And then we're watching a data breach. I lay all of those out, even though it's bigger than Black History Month, to talk about the ways.
Is anything bigger than Black History Month, Dr. K?
I'm glad you said that. Because you attack on Black History Month. I'm glad you said that. I'm with that. And
I had to check. I had to check a sister.
I agree with that. But I just say that with all the things that are happening, if you just focus on Black History Month, which is important, you might really overlook some of the other fundamental things that are happening. Because for us, as we're teaching and uplifting and celebrating Black history, we are talking about essentially what does it mean to be a part of the American story. Mm-hmm. And if we start losing what it means to be a part of a democracy, knowing that Black folks have fought in every single war in this country, from the Revolutionary War on up to what we're fighting now, because we're the ones upholding, defending, and trying to define democracy. So I tell people, using Black History Month as a model, as a lens through which to talk about these bigger issues, should make people very concerned and make them very aware. Now, more specifically with your question, as we're looking at what happened with the defense, the intelligence agency, and their leaked documents where they're freezing all of these, not historic moments, but they're freezing these moments that are significant to marginalized communities. In other words, if they did not celebrate them, then probably people in the company would not celebrate them as well. One of the things that Dr. Carter G. Woodson would lift up and say, look, Black History Month and Black History Week and Negro History Week is not just for Black people. It's for all of Americans. In fact, if you teach in an all-white environment and you are white, you probably need Black History Month teaching now more than ever. Like, you actually have to take into account everybody's contribution. You see what's happening in the education department, where folks who did DEI training under Betsy DeVos because she told them to have now been put on paid leave. We see what's happening with the cancellation and freezing of federal funds, which impacts marginalized, extremely impoverished Black communities. It is all connected within that bigger banner, and the hatred towards DEI, which is a hatred towards critical race theory, which really essentially gets into a hatred of Black people and our contributions. We are fighting more now than ever to make sure that we are not erased in the American historical narrative.
Steve, what Dr. K said was just really important. I remember several years ago, I had a friend of mine who was white, and she said, I want to go to the Smithsonian African American Museum of History and Culture, Blacksonian, and she kept asking me about it, and I said, what's the big deal? And she said to me, because I work with Black people. Mm. But here's the deal. So I said, all right, we got together. I took her down there, spent 3 hours, which is just a spoonful of information. And heading back, she was silent. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, I've been lied to. Why didn't I know this? And I said, well, yeah, because you're from rural Pennsylvania. And you were in a public school system that not address this. And I say all that to say, Steve, that one of the biggest Black history issues of the day is, has very much to do with what you do as it relates to Juneteenth. Are you at all concerned that Juneteenth will not get the recognition nationally that it has struggled to get over these many, many decades?
If we don't celebrate ourselves, nobody else will celebrate us. The Reverend Ronald V. Myers, Senior MD, the father of the modern Juneteenth movement. Doc believed that if we don't celebrate ourselves, we won't. This past Saturday went by, and nobody celebrated anything except for a handful of people. And, this is the perfect example of how we need to continually celebrate ourselves. National Freedom Day was on the calendar. It was the biggest obstacle to Juneteenth legislatively, was National Freedom Day. It was the 160th anniversary of the signing of the 13th Amendment Saturday. We launched a nationwide bell ringing campaign to bring attention to that. If we don't celebrate ourselves, we can't expect anybody else to celebrate us. If we don't know our history, and our history is, as in the words of one of my friends, a contrived scenario, right? Everybody's been lied to in America about history. Every history book is a lie. We're not any smarter. You go back in my interviews and see some of the people here that I've explained things to. It's all wrong. I'm looking for the big reset. That's what I'm looking for God right now, the big reset. Okay. We've got a lot of things that have been turned backwards, but it is a good starting point, right? It is a good starting point, but culture is everything. And that's the essence of what Dr. Pritchard was doing behind Black History Month, was culture is everything. When you infiltrate people and you want to bring them down, you attack their culture. When you want to build up a group of people, you contribute to their culture. And there is no culture in America. The Virginia chart, there was no culture in America. There's only one group of people that brought culture to America. It's us. And
so
once they realize,
what does that big reset look like in your mind?
What does it look like in my mind? It looks like we study, all of us, to study to show ourselves approved. We understand that we are aware of information and facts that have always been there, but that we now have to bring out. I appreciate Black History Month because February, as Dr. Pritchard explained to me, means purification. By the study of Black history, you purify America's mind, right? It adds balance to everything by understanding Black history, like February does to everybody, to time, because it's a leap year month. It brings balance to it. It was just a natural extension of where we were at. And it is an important thing for people to understand, because there is no American history without Black people. As the doctor said, we were in every war fighting for America, our Lord Dunsmore Brigade fighting for our freedom. Be able to, this reset to me looks like we really evaluate stuff ourselves. We sit down at the round table, the NJOF, the NAACP, the Urban League, the Sala Foundation. We sit down and we come together as one. That's part of the reset is, right? We have elected leaders, selected leaders, and directed leaders, right? Our elected leaders, I'm kind of disappointed in us, right? I'm very disappointed in how we are not working homogeneously together on Capitol Hill. It's a problem. I'm there every day. It's a problem. Okay. It's an issue, right? Our selected leaders, we give them way too much credit. the athletes, the entertainers who haven't, who just like, this is my opinion and we take it as gospel and run. The directed leaders, like those that are here right now, those who are directed by a mission from God, those are the people who are going to have to be a key in this turnaround, because our history is a contrived scenario. We are going forward with bad information, inaccurate information, and our ground is wobbly, right? So we have to do much better. And that's what I'm looking for out of here, because great things happen. There was a time when America did boom. It was about 1865 to 1870, when Black people had a little bit of chance to do something. The whole world benefited. I'm looking for a bigger reset this time. We're looking for a bigger reset.
Dr. K, let's talk a little bit about education, because as you know, there is also a movement this year to, as President Trump has said, to insert patriotic education. And you can figure out what that does or does not mean. But, by default, eliminating Black history, and how is it now? How should it be taught? When, to be quite honest, there may be some educators who are concerned about losing their jobs if they just, talk about these critical, truthful issues in American history that involve Black folks.
So thank you so much. I just want to start by saying that ASALH is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. We actually pride ourselves on studying the truth about who we are. Our founder was a historian. The work that Dr. Carter G. Woodson did to record our history and to make sure it was readily available is the reason why so many of us do this work. I am a historian by training. Not only have I done history in higher ed, I'm a professor now at Loyola University, Maryland. I also taught social studies and history in middle school. I mean, I did the deep dive work. So even though we can say our history is contrived, I think it's a yes and no, because there are a lot of people out here who are doing the hard research, going back into the annals of history, going into the research halls to make sure we are pulling our history forward, and we're lining our history up with the lies about who we are to make sure that every space we have, whether it's Black radio, Black television, the voices of Black people on the corner, like we have to speak our truth in every single one of these arenas, because if you control the medium, you control the message. So part of the reason that people have lies about Black history is because they're listening to the wrong medium. They should be listening to the spaces that we have in control, whether it's WHUR or WEAA in Maryland. It's like, hey, listen to where our history is, and then you take it and you run with that. So with that in mind, I want to say that. The second thing I want to say is that in what my colleague was talking about, when we hit the nadir, which is kind of the lowest point coming after this moment of Black redemption, was around 1876, at the end when we were dealing with the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, which was 1865, 1868, and 1870 respectfully, that when you have moments in this country where Black folks are making great advancements, what we call redemption, there's always regression. So where we are right now in this country should not surprise any historian or anybody who studies American history, because whenever there's redemption, there's always regression. Barack Obama, for a lot of white folks, that was a great redemption moment, and they started planning that day for regression. They said, don't worry about the White House. Let's begin to take over local governments, and let's make sure that we are flipping blue states red from the ground up. We may not get the governorship, but we're going to get the school board, the dog catcher, the comptroller. Like, that's how you change policy. Now, to zero in as a third point for what you were saying, when it comes to teaching, I argue in my research that there are three grounds that we have to look at. Like, where is the battle taking place? One, we know the battle is around the ballot, getting access to vote. When voting is easier, a la 2020, people vote. If you make it so they can vote after work, when they can vote on a Saturday, when they can vote by mail, they go and vote, which is why you saw laws being passed around this country after the 2020 election to make sure that when we got to 2024, people didn't have ready access to the ballot. They wanted to keep people from the ballot. The voting ballot has always been a problem because when Black men were able to vote after the 15th Amendment with the protection of voting rights in 1870, we sent over 600 men into office, from mayors to sheriffs down to Washington, D.C. to be senators. We were using the ballot to change policy. The second, of course, is dealing with the white nationalist church. We see that with someone from the white nationalist Christian who's now become a defense secretary. That church, that battleground on tying religion to policy, making sure that there's no separation between state and church, is one that has gotten us into a situation right now where we're using the Bible to enact policy. And I say this as someone who is a pastor's kid. I was fed the Bible when I was in the crib. When the brother just said, study to show thyself approved, my mind immediately went to a workman that need not be ashamed of the gospel of Christ. I'm like, I know scriptures like the back of my hand. And I know when you start saying, God said we can do this, well, then you can tell women what they can do with their body. And then the third thing, which is a big battleground, is around the classroom.
And that was my question. Yeah.
I was getting to that long route. Thank you so much for giving me the space to take a long road to get to a short place. But the classroom is a battleground. Because we understand that what we're looking at with Generation Z, and I do generational studies. I study all the way from the silent generation to the beta babies, right? 12:01 a.m., 2025, we had the beginning of the beta generation. I study generations. Generation Z is a generation that scares them because that's the first generation where when they went in elementary school, they were learning, look, you can be whatever you want to be. Families don't have to look a certain way. We can talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the classroom from first grade. Those elementary students went on to middle school where they marched out for Black Lives Matter. They went to high school where they marched out for climate control and gun control. They went to college and they were dealing with COVID-19, and now they're voting overwhelmingly for the Democratic Party. In order to stop that next generation of young people being that progressive, you got to get them into high school. Change everything. Take away the teaching of Black history. Take away women's history. Take away, Jewish Remembrance, Holocaust Remembrance Day. Take away Hispanic Heritage Month. Take all that away and go back to teaching what they call white American history, that they lie and call American history. If you get them then to believe in this white supremacist view, then you can control how they're going to vote 10, 15, 20 years later.
So help me with my question.
Yes.
And my question was, for those teachers who in 2025 are concerned about losing their jobs, and I'm not talking about Black teachers, I'm talking about all teachers. All teachers who know what the correct history is, the accurate. Let me not say correct. The accurate history is.
It's not even about accuracy. It's about completeness. The complete history.
What do they do?
What do they do? I work with a lot of HBCU professors. Our education team is outstanding. They are out. That's how I got 100 senators to vote for Juneteenth. They are outstanding. I tell them, go get me the original documents. What do? They have to be able to know themselves by example. And that's what the next TED Talk is coming about, by example. Let me give you a real brief example of this, right? You ask the average person who invented the telephone, right? And they will tell you Thomas Edison.
No, that's right? Alexander Graham Bell.
I'm Alexander Graham Bell. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about Thomas Edison because he's later on in the story. Alexander Graham Bell. But what they don't tell you, if you teach it, you say Alexander Graham Bell bought the patent for the telephone from Granville T. Woods, who sold it to him so that he could pursue other inventions. This man was so smart, and what he did, he ended up having to go to battle with Thomas Edison 3 times, who stole this patent. You tell the whole story. When you go look up, people say, look up the patent for the telephone. When you look it up, you'll see L.H. Latimer at the bottom of it. Lewis Howard Latimer, a Black man, drew the patent for Alexander Graham Bell. So he bought his idea from a Black man. Another Black man drew the patent for him. That Black man went on to go and invent the light bulb. You don't have to necessarily put it as a Black man, but just put it as a man. You have to be able to tell where it is. Follow in English, they call etymology, the origin of a word. The origin of a thing is what we have to do. That's part of the study to show ourselves approved. Our teachers are going to have to be more creative, more assertive, but more importantly, they're going to have to be able to have resources that they can get and utilize, knowledge and information. And that's where associations, foundations like ours come into play like that, right? Mm-hmm. Because believe it or not, the daughters of the Confederacy, they're busy. They're busy.
Let me just say, Asala's busy too, because we do have our Black History Month bulletin that we put out on a regular twice a year for teachers. We've actually launched, Harold, our Freedom School Initiative. We have freedom schools around the country where we are teaching on Saturdays, teaching Black history in churches, in community centers, in libraries. We are telling teachers, which is why we had our conference last year in Florida, because we were running to the fight to help support teachers saying, I can't teach about Black history because I have a mortgage. Like, I don't want to lose my job. It's like, you know what? What you do is in this moment of great despair, you have to stand behind institutions. You have to say, you know what? I can't fight this policy. I can't fight this White House as an individual. Institutions can hold our anger, hold the resources, and hold the fight. And that's where Freedom Schools. To answer your question very directly, teachers look to Asala. We have the resources, we have the lesson plans, we have the curriculum, and in many places around the country, we have the Freedom Schools. So if you want to get your students, just tell them about the Freedom Schools. You stay on what you need to do to keep your job, and you push them to these Freedom Schools that are happening in the evening and on the weekend.
Steve, before we came on the air, you said that you encouraged about, the current climate, the political climate as it pertains for Black history. And I said to you, you're the first Black person that I've spoken to in the past 14 days who had a positive feeling about the future. Talk to me about why you are so positive, so encouraged.
I'm so encouraged because pressure brings out the best in Black people, point blank. Pressure brings out the best in us, right? When we get kind of complacent, we fall behind. When we apply pressure to us, we excel, right? And that lack of pressure being applied lately has got us kind of in a complacent place. I am very much believe in Black people that when you apply pressure to us, we're going to stand up. You got a piece of coal. If you take that piece of coal and apply no pressure for it, it's still use, but at the end you got ash and you throw it away. You apply pressure to that piece of coal, you got a diamond, right? And we're there. That's where I'm at with us. We're not going to go anywhere. Okay. I have my own opinions about certain things that we follow as a Juneteenther. My grandfather my family's from a Black town in Oklahoma, one of the last ones there. We went and defended Dick Rowland. We always know that when pressure comes, great things happen. And that's what's going to happen here. I believe that that's going to happen. I've talked to people. Like I told you, I talked to Dr. Frank Smith. He was like, Steve, tell me. I said, Frank, are you digging down more? Are you working harder to make your stuff like? He says, yes, I'm doubling down now. It's going to be great because you ain't going to quit. You used to sneak with us in the Howard and raise the Juneteenth flag. We were still always pressing. So I believe that the more pressure that they apply, the greater we're going to be. Right? It's always that way. That's why I'm looking for it. That's why I look forward to it. I'm looking forward that the more pressure applied, that these organizations will get together, that we will sort out our differences, and that we will march forward. That's what I'm looking for coming out part of this reset. That's why I'm looking forward to it. Apply pressure to us. It ain't going to break us. It never has before.
Yeah,
it never has before.
Dr. K, I know I need to let you go in a moment, but I just as it relates to where we are about Black history, about the task, the challenge ahead for Asala and other historical allies. What is the call to action for you?
Thank you. And I've definitely enjoyed this conversation. As I'm thinking about my call to action, it really dovetails with what my stance is as the incoming president of ASALA. Coming in 2025, coming in with the new administration, coming in when we are under attack from DEI to Black History Month, when our very existence in this country and our continuation is being challenged, when people are feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and feel like there's no out. I go back to what I laid out. And what we're working on in ASALA is what I call Project ASALA 2025, which has three tenets, which is to preserve Black history, which falls in line with what Timothy Snyder wrote in his book on tyranny. Find the institution that you agree with, that you are committed to, and you defend that institution. I am telling people, in preserving Black history, you actually cannot fight on multiple fronts. When you're going to work and trying to pay bills and trying to figure out eggs versus butter, you can't fight on multiple fronts. Figure out the institution that you are committed to, the institution that can fight for you, whether it is ASALA or NJOF, and you defend that institution, not just with your words and your prayers, but also with your money. Yeah. The second piece is to promote Black history. I am telling people, if you really took a look at everything we contributed in this country, you can talk about Black history all day and just stay accurate on the teaching of history. And to do that, it means you have to do a little bit of work. You actually have to go and learn our history. I am not saying just sit back and read an op-ed. I'm not just saying just listen to your favorite podcast. Go and do the study for yourself. Find the books that are part of the critical mass of our understanding as Black folks in this country. And you can't read them all. Just choose one and then build from there. Make sure your children get one. Instead of playing just music in the car, put on that book on tape. If you're going out for a run, put the book on tape on and learn our history. Kind of like my father had me do scripture memorization by putting it on index cards, saying it before I got a dessert, making sure I knew it before I went to bed, writing it across my forehead. Do the same thing when it comes to Black history, like teaching our children all the time. And the third thing is to protect Black history. When you hear the false teachings and you know the truth, speak up. You have a social media platform. I tell people with social media, there's at least one person listening to you. One person. Very quickly, my sister accidentally went live on Facebook the other night and she was trying to fix her hair. And I'm like, girlfriend, I called her. I said, you know, you're live and 59 people are watching you do nothing but fix your hair. Think about that. You made a mistake and you got 59 viewers. Imagine if you were intentional. The idea of protecting Black history means using the platform you have to tell the truth about who we are.
I think that's a great place to end this conversation. We could talk about this for another hour, another week, another month, and not just Black History Month. Let me just say, Dr. K. Whitehead, Steve Williams, thank you so much for your spirited and muscular conversation. Just remember that we need both of you to keep doing what you're doing. And I really, really appreciate it. Happy Black History Month. And always remember, Black history, as you know, is American history. So
all things Juneteenth.
There you go. Thank you so much. I will be in touch.
Thank you, Harold.
That is the Daily Drum for this Monday, February 3rd, 2025, Black History Month 2025. I'm Harold Fisher.